Welcome back to another episode of the Huxley Morton podcast, the show where each week we speak to pharma company owners and industry leaders sharing their stories of personal and professional growth. This week, I'm joined by Rachel Jones. Rachel is the managing partner at Swii.ch, a rare disease patient engagement agency. Rachel, you and I have only spoken just recently. I think you were heading away, I was away. Working remotely, but welcome to the show. I've given you a short intro there. For those listening in, those who are perhaps not connected with you, give us an overview of who you are, who Swii.ch are, and what you guys do.
Okay, so thanks, James. Thanks for that. So, as you said, my name is Rachel Jones. I am one of the managing partners of Swii.ch, and Swii.ch is a patient engagement agency. We actually think we're the only rare disease patient engagement agency in Europe. We like to make that claim. We are the only one. And we basically connect pharma, patients, and actually not forgetting physicians. We connect all those people together to deliver solutions for the pharmaceutical industry. So pharma companies are our typical customer. So we've been running Swii.ch. I've been in Swii.ch probably about 3 years. I'm in Swii.ch. I'm a 50% partner. Swii.ch has been running for 5 years. So I actually met my business partner. It's and I'll go on to talk about this, the power of weak links, that I met Rob Wire, who co-runs Swii.ch, through a friend on a plane going from Barcelona, coming from a conference. You didn't know that, did you? Coming from a conference. That's where it all happened. Yeah, on a plane coming back from Barcelona. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. And I guess, I think there's a lot of people out there that are looking forward to getting back to conferences and traveling and everything else. So the fact that you've set that up is probably, there's no doubt a few people out there quite envious of that, Rachel. But look, the first thing I want to quickly drill into, you say that you're the first or the only patient engagement agency.
Rare disease, yeah. Patient engagement agency, yeah.
For rare disease. For me, what's the difference between a patient engagement agency and a patient recruitment agency?
Okay, so there is a big difference, and they do overlap as well a little bit. But a patient recruitment agency typically looks to find patients to go into clinical trials. So we can do a little bit of that as well, but that's not our main area, our main focus. We work with patients to actually develop solutions for pharmaceutical industry. So that's the difference. But it does overlap a little bit. So we do help out occasionally CROs, so clinical research organizations, to actually find those patients. So, and it's interesting you say that one of the problems that we often have when we work with pharma companies with is actually finding patients. So that's a massive deal in rare disease, actually locating people, and not just for clinical trials, but locating people to actually take the drug, but to also give us insight and, attend focus groups, for example. Finding people is a really big problem. Because by nature of what it is, some people, there can be 1 in 10,000 who have a rare disease. So that means we have to work globally. Because of that, we don't tend to work in just one market. We work globally. There can be just 100 people with that rare condition.
Wow, incredible. So on the global scale then, look, for me as a recruitment business, I've never done any recruitment in the UK, which is crazy. Everything I've done has been overseas. And I know that often that has meant early mornings, late nights, calls at stupid o'clock in the morning sometimes. How do you guys juggle that as a business?
I mean, we're cool with it, to be honest with you. One of the reasons that I wanted my own company, one of the reasons, was actually for that flexibility, that I realised my life and my work, because I love what I do, I'm absolutely fine with it all overlapping. So I'm absolutely fine with getting up early in the morning. So I've had a call with New Zealand at 7 o'clock this morning.
I was just about to say morning or evening person.
I've trained myself to be a morning person. I used to be a night person. I've actually totally changed myself to be a morning person, deliberately done so, and that now is a habit for me. So I'd much prefer to be up early in the morning, yeah, for sure. But we do have partners, and we have people who work for us all around the world as well. So we can give that 24/7 cover, but absolutely fully appreciate we will get up and work whenever we have to. We'll go where the customer is.
Interesting. And look, how have you trained yourself to be a morning person? Because I've done the same. I was, before I got into I guess work, I was a sports person, so I never necessarily used to get up too early because my day was very flexible. I started working, I was working the international markets. Most clients were Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And I very quickly got into the habit of going to bed at 9 o'clock, getting up early, doing my gym session before work, etc. How have you gone about that? Because people often say, "Oh, I'm just not a morning person," but I just think it's a case of shifting your day. How have you gone about it?
I mean, it's easier in the summer, isn't it? I find it really hard in the winter, really hard
Mm-hmm.
to do so. So now with all these light mornings, that is so much easier. But I think I did actually, I mean, I'm a real self-help kind of addict. I love self-help books and business books.
Yeah.
And there's so much evidence about entrepreneurs rising early in the morning, the Miracle Morning book. I mean, I guess you guys may have read those books. I heard of them. And it was a case of actually lots of things that I did realize I gained more control by being up in the morning. It's a very busy household here. I've got my partner, we've got a dog, we've got now two young people who've just finished uni or going to work. So I get up earlier to kind of get ahead, really. I think putting the alarm clock half an hour earlier each time, so it becomes just little tiny changes. The behavioural science bit,
Mm-hmm.
change it by 20 minutes each day. And it pays dividends. And also I realized if I don't stay up late, I don't eat as much. Right. So one of the ways I try not to eat and pick up food is I actually go to bed early and read or have a night, I do that and light candles and then shut the kitchen off, shut the cupboards off.
Amazing. No, I think there's multiple benefits, and look, I won't even get into that too much, otherwise you'll have me talking all day. So look, that's the current setup at Switch at the moment. That's how you'd like to run things. You trained yourself to be a morning person. But how did you first even get into this world of patient engagement, pharma? What was Rachel Jones doing many years ago? When you first got into this.
Oh, many years ago, I trained as a pharmacist. So I was going to be a dentist. I didn't have the manual dexterity to be a dentist. I liked science, but I liked people as well, and that was the reason to do pharmacy. But it became really apparent to me when I practiced as an NHS pharmacist that the bit for me that lit my fire was how people behaved. So there was a place for therapeutics and drugs, absolutely a place. But for me, I'd see more and more people every day. I'd see patients every day and their families. And actually just tweaks to their lifestyle would have made a monumental difference. Often they're on 10 to 15 therapies. When pharma, deliver a drug to somebody or want a prescription, actually that patient can be on about 10 therapies. It's not just one drug. And I realized that it was a lot of lifestyle changes, social changes, that was the bit that really excited me, the bit that we call around the pill. That's the bit that excited me. And I wanted to take what I knew as a pharmacist into industry for that reason. I desperately wanted to bring those insights in. And I used to drive past a large pharma company that I went to work for AstraZeneca, a large pharma company. And I used to drive past those big ivory towers, those big buildings, and actually lustfully think, I'll never work there. And I did. There was a turning point where I realized that the pull was too much. And it was one Christmas, and I spent the whole of Christmas applying to anything that was actually, and I won't say non-customer facing because I still did locum as a pharmacist, but anything that was actually going to use those skills. I applied for lots of things, went through quite a tough recruitment process and got into industry. But actually took a number of years to deploy those insights into industry.
Wow. So that Christmas was I guess the turning point for you then, by the sounds of things. And because I was speaking to Adam about this just recently, about the amount of applications that people actually put in sometimes to get into industry, because it is ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
So how did you do it almost over that Christmas, decide I'm going to get into this? How did you go about that? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people wondering what the secret was for those out there who have, perhaps sent in hundreds, thousands of applications. What did you do that you think allowed you to get the foot in the door?
I think actually having time served doing something else, being a healthcare professional, I think that was helpful. I think I would have struggled going straight from university. So I didn't apply straight from uni because I believed you needed a PhD. So there was this almost like urban myth, you needed a PhD. And actually, you may maybe do for research, but there are tons of other jobs where you don't need a PhD. And I think maturity, gaining a bit of confidence, being outside in the outside world. It's like I've told my kids recently, having left uni, you need to get a job because actually you need to learn to adult. You actually need to see the world. You need to manage people. You need to see, you need to do that whole gambit of things and use those transferable skills. I think it's a numbers game as well. I think I agree. People put multiple applications in. It would be a numbers game as well. It's a bit of both.
Look, I think the point that I picked out there, and that I would say is probably the biggest one, is probably having just that little bit of life experience and general confidence in the adult world, because you don't know it until it kind of hits you. I was always very confident as a young or sort of late teenager. I was traveling around the world doing boxing and things. So I was very confident, and I thought I was confident when I first went into the business world. But I think looking back now, there just wasn't that air of real internal confidence that you get that comes with age. So I think that is probably the biggest thing, and you can't fake that. You've kind of, sorry to curse, but like you've whittled out a lot of the bullshit fakeness out of your life, haven't you? And you're just like, no, this is what I want now. This is what I can do. This is what value I can bring to you.
You're rounded, aren't you, as a person? And I do think that I'd seen very sick people. I'd worked with physicians. I'd managed people. I'd actually managed people through. There was a time when you might remember there were mainland bombings in the UK. So the IRA at that point was bombing, and
I was quite young, but I do remember it being on.
Really young, I'm aging myself here now, and I don't want to. But there were mainland bombings, and actually there was one that went off in Warrington outside a boots store, and at that point it was actually a friend of mine who was in that boots store and had to deal with the people who had shrapnel injuries. But from that day on, we were getting bomb scares, and I remember being quite young. I was just out of university and I was really young. I had to deal with the police bomb scares. I had to deal with staff who were looking to me as their leader, and it almost felt like I have no right to be their leader. I'm some kid with a pharmacy degree, but I'm managing this store, and all of a sudden I grew up pretty damn quickly. So I do think that life experience is so important, but I think for anybody, you can get that anywhere. The trick is, somebody once told me, the trick is think of it as like a series of trapezes, and you're on the trapeze and then you're flipping to the next one and the next one, using some of that life experience. So I personally believe you can begin anywhere and gain those trapeze movements.
I do. No, I agree. So look, moving from there, look, you ended up at AZ. I guess in the news a lot recently. I know that Adam has been doing some work with AZ as well. How did that go? So you'd gone from being a pharmacist, you landed yourself in industry. What was that transition like? What was going through your head at that time?
I think I was so pleased and honoured to be there, actually. It was almost an honour to drop into that role. And that was actually, I dropped into supply chain. That's one of the hardest roles I've ever had, supply chain, really hard. What was going through my mind? I think it took me a while to actually recover from being gobsmacked that I'd got into this big company. But I guess what happens is wherever you are, right, you adapt to your environment. So within 6 months, it becomes your, to coin the phrase, new normal. People adjust to any environment. And then it became apparent to me that a massive organization, the navigation through it, that I was going to have to do it myself, that was absolutely down to me, that I wanted, to progress or have other jobs. That was going to be down solely to me to actually begin to lobby people and actually move across into other jobs I wanted.
So look, could you talk us through that a little bit? Because this is the area that I've never worked for a huge organization. When I was at my previous recruitment company working for someone else, it was part of a huge group, But as an individual company, when I joined, there were 6 of us. It then grew to, 50 or 60 by the time I left, and we had, molded into the group, and there was close to 1,000 consultants in the group, but we still had that small feel. So I've never worked in that big company environment. I was quite interested by the way that you described the dynamic really, and what because you had a strategy really, didn't you, as to how to elevate yourself. Talk us through that.
So I think any big company, and I think not just pharma, not just AZ, they're all, I mean, they're massive. They are a series of verticals, and they are a series of small companies within one large umbrella. So absolutely massive. And so in order to move between those verticals, so I had my eye on the patient bit from a very early time. At the interview, I thought that I could actually move across those verticals. Strategy was to actually, I think everybody, wherever you go, you have to do the day job really, really well and prove yourself. That is the first thing. 12 months, you have to absolutely prove yourself in any day job. But then it's a case of, for me, I learned to lobby, I learned to network across that business. That's where I learned it, right? That's where I can run a business, because I learned to lobby. I found people who worked in the job I wanted. I put up meetings with them after work. I actually did work for those other departments in my own time in order to get those competencies to move across. So yeah, I was determined I was going to do it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Rachel, the way you describe that is actually very similar to the experience I had with Big Pharma as well, because having worked for many years on the other side of the fence with CROs, to get in is very tough, as you say, but looking from the outside in, it looks like a very shiny, well-run organization. And then when you come on the inside of these very large organizations, exactly as you described with the verticals, that has been my experience. But I think the other point you made so succinctly is really that you have the opportunity, one has the opportunity to shine very quickly and get noticed and recognized for something more than the norm.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're kind of describing, isn't it? Is how you stand out from the crowd, how you differentiate yourself, but also having that long-term view as to what you want to achieve, and really effectively making that happen for yourself. That sounds like what you're describing.
You've got to make it happen for yourself. And I think I don't know if you found this, Adam, as well, but you've got to have so much, I think, intrinsic EQ, emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Suss out the people who will welcome you for being outstanding, and the people who might not welcome it quite as much. So, people are human beings, and some people might not welcome that kind of, and I won't say upstart behavior at all, but that kind of that behavior of wanting to challenge the norm, that's not always welcomed. So I think it's a lot of EQ to work out when and where to deploy that as well.
No, that has also always been my experience, particularly as a consultant working for a big pharma company. You're effectively always going to be the outsider. You're always working to a different set of rules. These people know that you're not on the same contracts that they're on, and there is a level of competitiveness around the activities that you're doing, and actually the delivery of the things that you're being asked to do. Because invariably, when I've worked for big pharma in a similar sort of setting, I do find that there are certain jobs that the permanent people just either don't want to do or won't do because they think it's outside of their pay scale, or they don't seem to want to roll their sleeves up and get into the dirty stuff. No. And that's where a consultant's role seems to be. That's where there has always been a role for me, for sure. But that's where you kind of differentiate yourself, because effectively they're saying, well, this is what we don't want to do. So you can do the low-hanging fruit. They can do the low-hanging fruit, but ultimately it's about other people to roll their sleeves up and do the real doing.
And I think I listen in now, because we all had the benefit of it, haven't we, with COVID and home working. I listen to my partner, who works in cybersecurity, but for multiple different companies. And I listen to my daughter, who's just got her graduate job in an engineering company. And actually, I listen to their telecons and mine that I will have with Big Pharma. We've all got the same telecon. I actually sometimes say to Neil, I could probably do some of your job, apart from the really technical bits.
Yeah.
I could do your job.
Because most of it's managing people, isn't it? It's managing situations. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And what I found
you're absolutely
interesting
correct.
there, Rachel, was the fact that you mentioned about, I guess, getting involved in other sort of vertical business units, and having that emotional intelligence to know where it would be appreciated and where it wouldn't. How did that go? Did you ever have a time where it backfired and you thought, oh, why did I get involved in this? Or did it go well? Was it well received by everyone, or did you experience any challenges with that?
And I think most of the time it went well. I guess it's how it's positioned. Yeah, most of the time it did, because I guess how I would have been positioning it would have been, look, let me come and help you. Let me come and do it off the side of my desk,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll make your life easier. But please let me learn what you do. So it's kind of how you sell it, isn't it, and how you package it. Yeah, so most of the time it was. Had it been, I suppose, had it been at the expense of my current job, that would have been politically quite difficult for the incumbent manager. Most of the time it did, I think.
Because I'm just thinking at the back of my mind, and I've had several conversations with business owners, entrepreneurs, people that have risen through the ranks, and often, particularly as a woman, trying to almost take ownership of other areas of things, it can be almost like you're stepping on someone's toes. And I know that there's several male bosses or leaders that don't necessarily like that coming from, if it was from another male, they'd maybe just overlook it, but as a female in business, sometimes that has been frowned upon. So I was just interested to know how that had gone for yourself. But clearly you selected the right parties, you managed it well, and got the results, because you were at AZ for quite a long time. How long were you there in total?
Over a decade, actually, over a decade. But going back to what you said, I have to say, I never experienced there in that snapshot of time that sexism. I never experienced that feeling that because I was female, there was ever going to be that problem. I suppose the only challenges I suppose it was the only challenges I ever encountered would be when my current manager perhaps didn't have the ambition that I had. So it takes a real leader to manage somebody who's got massive ambition. When you haven't got that yourself, you want to just do your day job, but you're managing somebody who clearly wants to go across the chain. That's going to go one of two ways. You're either going to be a great leader and let them go, or you're going to be a little bit threatened. So I'd say that's perhaps the only time it's quite difficult for somebody to move across that chain. I don't know, Adam, if you feel the same, that if you come across that.
Well, I mean, success isn't a straight line, is it? It never is. You come across all sorts of different personalities. And I think what I've experienced is just that over the years, like, the manner in which you and I have connected is one of those examples, isn't it? Through professional networks and like-minded people, there seems to be an affiliation and collaboration of people, of good people who have good principles, and that was how you and I think initially connected through rare disease space and some of the work that I've been doing with some rare disease guys. So I think there are an awful lot of similarities there, but I also just find more and more, I don't know whether you also do, that birds of a feather seem to be flocking together, particularly more and more in post-COVID times, just because of the nature of how we're connecting with people and choosing to spend our time. This being a case in point. We are choosing to have these discussions, to do things that we perhaps would never have challenged ourselves to do before. Yeah. That we are all outside of our comfort zone in the fact that we're doing something different.
Yeah. Totally, and it's almost equalised everybody, hasn't it? That I've found as well now on a call, because we're all on Zoom, everybody's in more casual dress, everybody's got dogs and kids, and you're kind of digitally intruding into someone's home, aren't you? It's I love looking at people's homes when they actually come, and I hate it when they've got a background, a Zoom background, because I like to see what's going on in their house.
I'm quite open when I say to people, when they come on with a fade out behind, I think they're hiding something. And some people say to me, well, I'm in my kitchen. I'm like, well, I don't mind. I'm quite happy to look at your kitchen. I don't have anything to hide. I think it shows a certain genuineness and humility around, this is where we're at. We have a choice. I could change my angle of camera and you could see all sorts over that side. And similarly out there, there's a window. But we choose the filter in inverted commas, don't we? We all choose our own filter, what we're comfortable with. I mean, James has got a lovely backdrop, by the way.
Yeah,
That's the benefit of having a nice partner who is into a bit of interior design, making wherever I sit look much better than what I do on my own. So
Don't be harsh.
but look, Rachel, so you were at AstraZeneca for over a decade. Where did the decision then come to move on from that, and where did your journey take you from then on?
Well, what happened for me was that, I mean, I loved working for that company. I've seen the world working for that company. But what happened for me was that AstraZeneca relocated to Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really difficult year. So we were told, I remember, and this is, I suppose, I hope not oversharing, but sharing. So my dad died, and I remember we had, my mum died. My dad died subsequently. My mum died, and we had my mum's funeral on the Friday. And on the Monday, I got made redundant from AstraZeneca. And I remember coming home and sitting there thinking, whoa, these two big things in my life that I'd kind of, these two, if you think of them as a stool, the two legs of the stool, kind of fell off in about 3 days, the space of 3 days.
That soon?
Yeah, 3 days between them.
Wow.
And AstraZeneca was going to relocate to Cambridge. And I was a single mum at the time, and I had 2 small children, and I wasn't going to be relocating to Cambridge. And I guess personally, I absolutely then, maybe I was ahead of it at that point, believed that we could be location independent, that I didn't have to go and up and lift everything to Cambridge. And I wasn't going to do that. But the redundancy period, the way it worked out that we all needed, lasted actually 3 years. So the 3 years of knowing I was going to leave that company, it was a 3-year period of knowing we were going to exit whilst that transfer down to Cambridge occurred and buildings were being built and all kinds of stuff. And I guess I chose after that, after those 2 big life changes, I chose to make something of the 3 years. So I chose not to, I suppose, be a victim, or obviously there was a lot of grief to overcome, and I had to go through the curve twice, a kind of double curve, a curve squared, really, isn't it? Of those things hitting at once. But I decided to take control of it. And at the same time, there came a project to help deliver patient centricity, patient engagement into AstraZeneca to help deliver that change program. And I desperately wanted to do that, desperately wanted to have that project. And possibly before I would have actually been a bit reserved. It was being delivered at a very high level. But I remember, and I'll name her, one of my friends, Siobhan Southam, actually said, go for it, what have you got to lose? So I did go for that project, and I did get to deliver that project. And that changed everything for me as well, because my final few years working my redundancy actually were delivering what I'd always wanted to do. I brought the customer closer to AstraZeneca. That's what I wanted to do when I joined that company. So we did deliver that project. We even published it. We published it in the BMJ. We brought patients close to the strategy for AstraZeneca. We did tons of stuff. It was amazing. Yeah, it was lovely. And that enabled me to make that transition out and have the confidence really to go it alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well played. Bravo.
Remarkable events. Yeah, losing your mother, getting made redundant, then subsequently losing your father, being a single mum to then coming out of that, having delivered on what you had kind of set out to do, and then entering into entrepreneurship. What?
I've got a rubber backside.
That's adversity. That's adversity faced head on, I would say, Rachel. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. What would you say was the most challenging of those times, Rachel? Because it sounds like there was a lot on your shoulders. I know even running a business on, as a couple and having a young son is tough enough at times, but you had a couple of dependents, looking up to you for support without your own parents to support you, which, sometimes we all call into parents to, get some babysitting duties, etc., where we can. How on earth did you manage this, and how, like both logistically and mentally?
I don't know. to be honest with you. No,
Failure wasn't an option by the sounds of it. It was not.
I don't know. I think I probably deal with things by, so I deal with things by boxing them up and then dealing with them later. So I dealt with the grief and all of that much later on, which is weird for me, because a lot of people, actually, I deal with stuff when people think I should have got over it, and I'm just beginning that process when other people would have dealt with it. So I kind of displaced those emotions. So that's what I did. I boxed them up, and I'm not saying that's good, because that does come back to bite you, really. You come back to reflect upon it. So that, I think, and I mean, I suspect I was quite lucky in a way, because all through my career, AstraZeneca had been incredibly, because it was a part Swedish company, incredibly flexible. So I think that was lucky as well. I couldn't have done it had I worked for the NHS or worked as a pharmacist. That would have required me to, be there at certain fixed hours. So combination of flexibility, of dealing with the stress by pushing it out of the way a little bit. I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do, but I did. And yeah.
Whatever,
Otherwise, I don't know.
what I would say. I mean, I'm no expert. I've been fortunate enough that I've never been put in any situations like that. So, can't cast any judgment. And I'd say to anyone, it's whatever works for you, really, isn't it? But look, so you landed yourself in the world of entrepreneurship, which brings with it many more challenges. How did that start off? How many were there at the beginning? Were you in an office? Talk us through the setup.
So when I left AstraZeneca, I had two pieces of unfinished business. I wanted to go and study behavioural science, so to the point of the behaviour and the person and the all around the pill bit. So I did go and enrol and studied behavioural science. And what I did was I actually, I consulted for first 18 months. So I consulted to a number of companies, and obviously coming straight out of pharma, pharmacist, behavioural, all that kind of stuff was very saleable. And it became obvious to me that when I was working for other people, I just wanted my own baby. I just had to have my own baby. And the driver was never to make money, or obviously, we all like to have a certain standard of living, but the driver was to be able to, I suppose I always say to people, I don't know, buy the toilet rolls and do the strategy and employ the staff and pitch and drive it forward. I actually like that width of responsibility. That's the driver. Had to
Independence, flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility. Yeah. If you do, I don't know if you've ever done either of you, the values exercise, where you have to list your top 50 values, then eventually you have to bring them to 3, which is your absolute values. And one of mine is freedom and creativity, but I also like safety. So there's a little bit of a tension going on there as well. And it's really interesting if you do it, the 3 values, nobody can ever displace those values from you. So I've had that freedom, flexibility and creativity ever since I was born. I think they're probably intrinsic. I think with all of us, those values.
I think, following on from your point, James, having experienced some adversity around work as well and experienced redundancy, the fact that you had 3 years to get used to that is great, because I never did. I got very little notice, and so it was a little bit of a kick in the short curlies. But 3 years to prepare for that at least gave you some perspective and really somewhere to work back from, particularly with the challenges that you were faced with at the time. Funnily enough, I was working for AZ at that time that announcement was made for Covance, because I was running lots of studies on behalf of AZ through Covance, and it took years, and it has taken years, to move that site from Audley Edge down to Cambridge, where I actually went only a couple of weeks ago for the first time. And it's an incredible place, and yet it's taken such an enormous amount of investment, time, and I know so many people who were affected and decided not to transfer themselves, their families down to Cambridge, because they're 2 different ends of the country on a whole different scale, different, aren't they? Particularly if you're embedded in the Northwest, your family's embedded there. It's a completely different part of the country. It's very, very different culturally on many different levels. That must have sent shockwaves through tens of hundreds of people at the time that those announcements were made, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was dreadful because it impacted not just us, but when that happens to any company, that impacts that whole infrastructure in that area. It impacts travel companies. We did a lot of traveling, impacted taxi companies. The whole shooting match was hugely impacted by it. And it's impacting at that point. You know, had I been 20, I could have done that move to Cambridge, but you're impacting people in their kind of 40s, 40 plus, aren't you really at that point? And they have begun to get other things in their life that are more or equally important, aren't they, at that point?
You've already put your roots down.
Yeah.
That's the point. And the other full circle loop of that is that I've subsequently been back to Audley Edge and seen what an incredible site it is now as a biohub. You know, it is absolutely transformed. And again, it has transformed the area for a positive. So we've now got, you know, 2 incredible medical centres of excellence. There's 200 plus businesses that were spun out of not just AZ, but actually life science was invested enormously in that area, wasn't it? And subsequently, the same is happening in and around Cambridge, and there are other hubs around the UK where that's happening. So I think it kind of speaks to the point around the investment in UK life science research and development and where we are today with the fantastic pharmaceutical companies and transformations that are happening every day now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And look, where did you go from there? Because like, so your values, was it freedom, creativity, and flexibility?
Yeah, the fourth one is safety, but that's a bit
safety.
Yeah,
that doesn't almost seem congruent with the other ones almost. But look, that took you through, you know, being a consultant. You then ended up getting into founding a business. Give us a snapshot. How's that going? Because that again brings more challenges. It's different, you know, and often when you first start it, everyone all of a sudden thinks you're a business owner, you're a millionaire. You know, it's often not the case. And you're just like, guys, I'm still working ridiculously hard. I'm up early, I'm up late. I'm, you know, doing more hours than what I used to do when I was on a 9 to 5. And at the start of it, getting very little in return often. So, you know, how are things going? How did it start? How are things going now?
So I think, how it actually started was I met my business partner as I was leaving AstraZeneca, actually, and I met him through my friend who had encouraged me to do the patient engagement work. She was traveling back from a conference in Barcelona, swapped business cards, and the rest is history. And Rob had a history of running businesses. So Rob had run digital agencies in Manchester and had actually sold out really successfully. So he probably shares some of those same values of that. You know, he's not a corporate animal, he would admit that. And so I think for me, the introduction was made. We began to work on co-projects together to understand, could we work together? And we are a Venn diagram. We absolutely bring that pharma and medical piece, and he brings that entrepreneurial piece, and we meet in the middle with the behavioural bit. But I think I don't know if I could have done it on my own without somebody who'd actually been an entrepreneur, because I think Rob frequently, and it is really, they do that, don't they? There's that visual of being in corporate is like a hamster wheel, and running a company is that up and down. It is like a kind of sine wave, isn't it? With crevasses and it is like that. And I don't know if I could have done that without somebody who'd been through that, who went, yeah, this is normal, let's just push through. That, I think you perhaps need that. So maybe if you're brought up in a family, but I was brought up by accountants, and accountants are not entrepreneurs. They really are not. They are fiscal controllers. So that's been a challenge for me.
And risk averse. I think risk averse by very nature, aren't they?
Totally. So I was brought up by accountants, but desperately wanted to run a business. So that, I think that's the match, really, being in business with somebody who's done that before. But I bring the corporateness, really, and bring it, I suppose, through and say, well, that's actually what the customer's thinking at that point. Never mind what they're saying. Actually, that's what they're thinking. Actually, that's what their drivers are, because I've been that customer. So, never listen to just what a customer is saying. Actually look at their body language, look at what their drivers are, because that's the deep insight that's driving whether they are going to work with us or not what they've said, not what the RFP will say. It's their deep personal needs which will drive that sale. People buy from people, always.
And you were bringing that emotional intelligence that you spoke about earlier, to the table, and that was, the dynamic that you guys had. So look, what does life look like at Swii.ch now? How many staff are you at? Are you hybrid? Are you remote? Are you in the office? What's the deal at the moment?
We did have an office. We were actually at that BioHub, Adam, that you talked about.
Right.
So we were at the BioHub for a little bit. Then we got quite a cool office in a little place called Congleton, which is in the middle of Cheshire. We got an ex-tobacco factory, so it is really, really cool mill building. But then COVID hit, so there are 5 full-time members of staff, but we have a circle of people surrounding us. So the model is that we have 5 full-time engaged people, but we do have that model of developers, software developers. We have writers. We have a psychologist. So I'm not a psychologist by training. I'm a behavioural scientist. So we've got a clinical psychologist joining us. We've got a number of people surrounding us. And I think one of the reasons we've got those people, a couple of reasons, we've been in the industry long enough. That's 3 reasons. Second one is many people left AstraZeneca. There's a whole Silicon Valley up north of people providing that expertise who chose not to move. They chose to actually provide freelancing services. So there's a Silicon Valley of hundreds of thousands of people all delivering medcoms and strategy and digital. And I think the third one, we always say, because we're fun to work with, actually, that we manage to, we're nice to work with. We do, Rob will always say, we have a laugh, we're very transparent, we're very open, and we do stuff that we love, actually. Obviously we have stuff that we have to do and we have to deliver. Most of the time I think we're probably quite fun to work with, quite personable.
I get the distinct impression you do the work always with a smile on your face, don't you, Rachel?
Yeah.
I think you and I have spoken a number of times, and I always get that impression all the time. I think your personal and professional is consistent. You are the same person. You are that rounded individual, and that's what you put out.
It has to blend. I mean, obviously there are bits, aren't there, the accounting and that kind of stuff that has to be done. There's discipline and we have to do that kind of stuff, but most of the time, I think, honestly, I think I'm really lucky. I open that laptop every day and I'm gobsmacked by some of the stuff I learn, some of the stuff I see. And I felt that at AstraZeneca as well. Some of the data I would see that was a game changer. I think all of us, I think we're quite lucky, actually, in the environment we're in. Whatever we've been through, I think that's quite lucky.
Well, I think we're at that point now. I say I think all 3 of us actually are very much in the position where we're doing the things that we enjoy for the right reasons, not because someone is telling us to do them. We are all here of our own volition and making our own choices to be here. And that autonomy and the drive to really live your passion in the work that you do, it comes across with you. I think also with James and myself, we are all extremely principled around the things that we do.
Just that enjoying yourself element. I'm a recruiter, so when I'm recruiting for people, I don't just look at the role and responsibilities, because let's face it, you look at most job descriptions or you see the adverts, you're like, that's a job description. It is so boring. And you're like, who wants to know that they're going to be doing this? But if you can say you're going to be working with this team, this individual, and as you said, Rachel, look, we're fun to work with, that makes a job. Otherwise you're just carrying out responsibilities. Nobody wants to just carry out responsibilities. People want to work in a team doing something that they like. And there might be some tasks that you don't necessarily, they're not going to be your favorites, but you do them because that is part of the package towards the end goal. So I think you've absolutely nailed that side of things by the sounds of things. But look, what have perhaps been the biggest challenges, and what is next for you guys at Swii.ch? If you were to talk about your plans for the next 18 months, 2 years, what's on the cards?
I think biggest challenge has been possibly as a small company, that can do big things and is highly experienced, but I guess getting noticed. So yeah, a small company getting noticed, I think, and getting on the books really of extremely large companies. That's hard for any boutique or small agency or consultant. That's quite hard, because I think the way in which everywhere is structured now, it's industry agnostic, isn't it? That a lot of blue chip will hire other big agencies. There'll be a certain limited list. And I suppose I would challenge that, in that if you see big industries as an ocean liner, actually maybe sometimes the yachts around the side that are agile and really inventive and really fun to work with, maybe you want to actually try the yachts sometimes, to help drag that ocean liner along.
You're describing a book that I read a while back now, called Small Giants, I think it was. And it was talking about smaller, more entrepreneurial companies not wanting to become these big ocean liners, but actually just being amazing at what they do, and therefore absolutely clearing up. And I think that there will be more of these as we go forward, because everyone can work remote. There's less barriers to entry, etc. And actually, you find a specialist in your subject, whatever that may be. That's where you want to be forming those relationships. And I think even the verticals in the big, corporates need to perhaps be looking at that themselves.
I think the other.
Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say also, I think you mentioned niche boutique consultancies. There is always a role. There are always gaps to fill. There will always be things that the big farmers can't do and won't do. But actually, you can be parachuted in with your skill set, and you can fix something very quickly in a very agile approach, like you've described.
Yeah.
And that may produce long-term gains, but certainly it will fix a problem very quickly, because you can just act upon it. You don't have those layers of bureaucracy and political issues to get through. Once you've got the signature on the paper, you're there, aren't you? That's how you work.
Don't you? And you do. And I think also small companies can actually be quite at the cutting edge of a lot of tech, of a lot of change. We can actually maybe go to a conference, make a decision that we're going to take on board an expert in that area, or pilot something, or do some research. We can do that very, very quickly. There isn't a layer of we are the board members, so we can make that happen really, really quickly, but also with an experienced couple of pairs of hands as well. So yeah, that would be the challenge, but the opportunity, I guess, James.
Fine. And then on the word of opportunity, so what is the opportunity going to look like when you guys seize it? What's in store for you guys?
Oh, what's in store for us? So I think actually beginning to make more noise. So I think being I think more present, making a bigger noise. There is and there's a guy I follow called Daniel Priestley, and I think I've mentioned him before actually, which is prolific beats perfect. So that any business, actually it doesn't matter what area we're in, that actually it's not about knocking on doors and cold approaches, it's about being a thought leader. So expect more of that thought leadership, that we're okay with longer sales cycles, because we see it is that know, like, trust, that I don't want to make a quick sale. I want to actually go through that know, like, trust and have a long-term relationship with my customers. So expect to see a lot more of that thought leadership. We're already doing it, but I suppose a little bit more bullish in that area.
And I agree with that, because I think we're all changing the way that we buy. It's very rare that you will buy something off the back of a cold call these days. It's because you've seen someone online, you've seen their marketing, you've seen their post on LinkedIn, and then maybe a call comes in, or you connect, and you've already got that familiarity. So look, I think that's a fantastic strategy. And Daniel Priestley, I think I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, I did actually do some work with him, did some courses with him when I left AZ. So that was actually quite transformational. Yeah, and 7 touch points to actually convert from not knowing somebody into a customer. That's seven touch points.
Interesting. Definitely be looking that one up. Well, look, we've got towards the end of the show here, Rachel, and one thing that we do with all of our guests, Adam, isn't it? A quick fire round, just to get some snippets of knowledge and insights from you.
I think we've had a lot, but to be fair, yeah, there are some other questions, of course, we'd like to ask.
Going to go, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
So look, I'll kick us off with quick fire question number one, and that is, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Follow your guts, follow your heart. It's there for a reason.
Fantastic. You've mentioned a couple of books as well already.
Yeah.
Are there any other resources or books on your bookshelf that you're reading at the moment you want to share with our audience?
Loads of stuff. So The Dip, which is a really quick one by Seth Godin, which talks about, and I don't know if I've cracked this one yet, but actually when you go into a dip, is it something you're going to push through, or should you reverse out? Is it a cul-de-sac, or is it just a dip? So The Dip talking about when things are difficult, that's often a sign that you should push through. And 10% of people push through, don't they? And 80%, 90% retreat.
I love Seth Godin. His book is Tribes, isn't it? It's the Tribes one.
Loads of them.
Oh my gosh, he's absolutely spectacular. I've listened to him on loads. I've listened to him on loads of podcasts. He is incredible.
Yeah,
absolutely incredible. And I was talking to my neighbour only yesterday about him, actually, because it sounds like me and my neighbour are listening to the same podcast.
Really?
And he is an accountant, funnily enough, but he's not your standard accountant, let me tell you. Thank you so much.
And look, the next one, again, you've already touched on your values. So this is pretty much answered already. But look, what are the top three qualities that you value most when building a team?
A team. So I will look for transparency. I will look for openness. I'll look for humility. I may have given you more than three, but I also think my view is I'm very keen on, if somebody's got the ability and the attitude, I believe we can train them to do almost anything. What I don't look for is a carbon cutout. That's a big thing of mine, that people don't have to be a carbon cutout. They have to have personal attributes and some ability, and we can make them into anything, actually.
100%. I'm the same. I tend to hire people that I like. Again, trust.
Yeah.
You know, for me, if that's it, I'm like, you're joining my business. It's down to me to show you what's good. And you to execute it, you know. So if you know someone, you like them, you trust them, you know, they're going to have fun with you doing it. It's so much easier to do that. So definitely agree with that one, Rachel.
We've talked quite a bit about what you do in work. What is it you enjoy when you're outside of work? What do you do for downtime, dare I say it? And please don't say work, because I don't believe you.
I do work, but I do listen to behavioural science podcasts when I'm walking the dog, but loads of stuff. But I actually love cooking. That's how I will unwind. But I do like kind of superfood cooking, so green shakes, and I'm at my happiest with a cup of tea, a pack of biscuits, sounds awful, and loads of cookery books, flicking through them. And often I collect loads and don't even cook from some of them. But cooking, I think. Yeah.
You had me sold at the biscuits, not so much on the green shakes, I don't think.
Oh, no, the green shakes, for sure, yeah.
But what is the final question for you then, Rachel? What is your number one golden rule for life and business?
It's people. It's all about people. People make business, don't they, and life. You know, if I say to you, everything I've described to you, there has been a person involved in that. You know, it's not been a CV, it's been a person who's almost given their hand out and pulled me into the next part of my life. It's all about people.
Fantastic. Well, look, and I think, you know, this podcast has been all about you. You know, we're not looking at a CV, we're hearing it firsthand, and that is what people like to listen to, you know. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Rachel. For anyone looking to reach out to you afterwards, whether it's investors, potential employees, people that are interested to hear more about Switch, you said you were going to be more visible. What is the best way to get hold of you?
Oh, email me, actually. Yeah. I don't know if you can supply that, but it's r.jones@swii.ch. So the II is Intelligent Insights. That's what that stands for.
Fantastic. Well, look, we'll make sure we get that published along with the show and everything else. But Rachel, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Have a fantastic evening.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers then. Thank you.